This is Garis Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 311, entitled Masculist Rejection of Princess Snowflakes. Description. This flyer describes my experiences with my first dating partner since I returned to Melbourne. That is, a woman I thought initially would be quite compatible, since she was very smart, a FIP, that's FIP, financially independent person, an author whom I respected. However, as she relaxed, her true Princess Snowflake mentality surfaced, and as a result, we broke up. This first-hand account may be useful to younger MGTOWs and masculists and serve as a lesson as to what not to accept in a woman's behaviour and attitudes. Flyer itself. Just a minute, I'll do it a different way. It's not working. Okay. Masculist Rejection of Princess Snowflakes by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer relates my experiences with my first date, now that I've lived 4 months in Melbourne, Australia, after having lived 12 years in China and half a century outside Australia, where I grew up. It's a real-world case, so I'm hoping its authenticity will be instructive to young MGTOWs and masculists. When I returned to Oz, which is Australian slang for Australia, and much easier to say, I had to make a decision whether to date, that is, having a tway-twef, that's 2A, 2F, equals 2 apartments, 2 FIPs, girlfriend, or go full MGTOW monk, that is, have no girlfriend at all. Since I'm a fairly social creature, at least with people I respect, I chose to try to find a tway-twef girlfriend using a commercial e-dating website. I quickly learned that my masculism was repulsive to monocultured Oz women, whose hypocrisy really annoys me, in parentheses. That is, it's okay in their eyes for women to lash out at men as feminists due to the way men oppress women, but it's not okay for men as masculists to lash out at women for the way women oppress men. For example, women's financial parasitism, man's slavery, the fluffy feminist hypocrisy in the divorce courts, financially massacring one father in 4, etc. These Oz that's monocultured, women are monoconscious, that is, they have only had their feminist consciousness raised and know nothing about masculism, or how women oppress men. For them, heavily brainwashed by feminist ideas most of their lives, they feel offended and threatened when I tell them I'm a masculist. They want nothing to do with me. This makes me feel that women are going to have to be taught about masculist ideas whether they like it or not, because if women don't help men fare the gender laws, for example in the divorce courts, and help men bring in a paternity rejection right, then there'll be a sex war, where responsible males, masculist soldiers, will assassinate gender politicians, murder thousands of feminazi divorce court lawyers and judges, and go into the streets and simply shoot feminazi vermin. Because these men will not tolerate, in capital letters, that these feminazi bitches indirectly wipe out whole populations due to the toxicity of the divorce courts that they have created, resulting in 2/3 of young men in many countries refusing to marry, rejecting paternity, the huge issue, and spending their money on themselves. That is, they have gone MGTOW, men going their own way. This monoconscious rejection by monocultured Oz women just increases my anger against feminists due to its obvious hypocrisy. That is, it's obvious to me as a masculist, but not at all obvious to them, since these monoconscious feminist women know nothing about masculism, nor how women oppress men. I reason that it would be a huge waste of my time and mental energy if I hid my masculist views, got to know a woman, and then, sooner or later, probably via my large website, she learned about them and then decided to kill the relationship. It can take months of emailing, initial dating, getting to know someone well enough for both parties to be able to relax enough to reveal their true selves, warts and all. The only women who did not reject my masculist views outright were bicultural women who had migrated to Oz earlier in life and for whom, in their first culture, feminism was not a big deal, so that they had not been indoctrinated by it. I eventually started connecting with a Russian woman, whom initially I thought was 70. I'm 71. It turned out that she had lied about her age by a whopping 7 years, as I learned from reading one of her books that I bought. So she was a liar about her age. She was a graduate of a top Russian university, so was obviously bright, which has always been my top criterion in a woman, being myself a professor of math, physics and computing, and knowing that if the IQ difference in a couple is more than 5 points, the relationship dies. This Russian woman wrote books on health, yet she was about 20 kilograms overweight, which had affected her health, particularly her mobility. She had a lazy arterial valve in her leg, so had circulation problems. From my perspective, this was her own stupid fault. I feel this way because some years ago I read that there are boroughs in New York State that are low class, low IQ, not health conscious, eat junk food, drink sodas, smoke, don't go for walks, don't exercise, don't eat fruits and green vegetables, don't take vitamins, and die in their 60s. There are other boroughs in New York State that are upper middle class, professional, high IQ, health conscious, don't eat junk food, don't drink sugar water, don't smoke, go for daily walks, exercise, eat lots of fruit and green vegetables, take vitamins, and die in their 90s. That is, merely by changing one's lifestyle, one can, and in capital letters, add 3 decades to one's life expectancy. 5 exclamation marks. This made a deep impression on me when I see that in Oz, 40% of women are obese, in capitals. Then my attitude towards them is one of sneering contempt. Quote, "You stupid, ignorant, dumb fucks. By not bothering to educate yourself into health matters, you shorten your life expectancy by 3 decades. You fucking morons. You stupid, obese shits." Actually, with my Russian date, I was not so critical of her overweightness at first, since she seemed to have about the same BMI, body mass index, of just over 30, as many Oz women her age. She had lived in Melbourne for nearly 30 years, after half a century in Russia, mostly Moscow, and said she would be able to show me Melbourne, and she did. She was a lot of fun, and showed me places I didn't know existed, opening up my eyes to a city I grew up in, but half a century ago. Since she was bright, wrote books, and was obviously a FIP, that's financially independent person, I thought I had been rather lucky, that is, getting a woman who was not anti-masculist, and who satisfied my main criteria as a masculist, that is, was not a fluffy feminist, and she was smart enough for me. Gradually, however, her negative side began to surface, as judged by me, the masculist male. She started complaining that I didn't pay enough attention to her, even on crossing the road, or didn't help her climbing the steps to get on a tram. Melbourne is one of the few cities in the world that has trams, like San Francisco. At first, this just seemed a bit quirky to me, and I didn't give it much thought. Then I got a rather critical email from her complaining that I did not wait with her for her tram to arrive, that is, possibly 20 minutes. It started to dawn on me that this woman, even though she was 77, behaved like a Princess Snowflake. That is, she expected her man to mollycoddle her, which as a masculist I find anathema. As a masculist, I can't respect a woman who expects to be treated like a child, to be pampered. Her complaints about my lack of attention to her well-being really started to get on my nerves, and I began to see her as a bit of a nag. I had a mother who nagged, and my fourth wife nagged, turning into a real hypogamous bitch after my previous third wife, both Chinese, stole half my savings that I could not get back from the corrupt Chinese legal system, which favours its own citizens. I will not tolerate a nagging female. Such women I quickly dump and give them what they deserve. That is, nothing. That is, no attention. I feel, as a masculist, that masculists as a group need to teach women, to teach society, that nagging females are not to be tolerated and will be punished by men by such women not getting one. Women are herd animals, sheeple, who follow what other women think. In the distant past, if a woman lost the meat source of the man she was vaginaing, then if she had no female backup support group who could give her meat in an emergency, for example, her man got injured or killed, so could no longer hunt for her, then she risks starving to death. So women evolved to have a strong female herd instinct. In Paris, France, the women are much slimmer than in Melbourne or most cities because the Parisian men place strong moral pressure on their women to be slim. Otherwise, they don't get penised. The French have a daily used expression to describe obese women. It is gros imbasables, that is, fat unfuckables. This expression is used in daily speech and is just part of the culture. This expression gives women the message that if they don't bother to count their calorie intake per day and keep it within healthy limits, then they will pay a heavy price. They will be ostracized. They will be rejected by men for being gros imbasables. I would like to see something similar be put on women in Melbourne and across the Western world. That is, it is taboo for women to nag men. Those women who do nag their men need to be taught that nagging women end up alone as cat ladies, rejected by men. And as they get old, by society as a whole, since no one cares about single, old women. They live miserable, lonely lives and try to take solace in their cats, hence the dismissive term cat ladies. Once I saw my Russian date increasingly as a nag, my initial good impression of her began to sour. I complained to my brother, who thought that her expectation that I should wait with her until her tram came was unreasonable. Since this woman was the first Russian I had known, I had no way of knowing whether her WTF, at living here for non-native English speakers, WTF stands for what the fuck, meaning what the hell, or expressing surprise. Her WTF type behaviour and attitudes were her own individual quirkiness or cultural, that is, Russian. For all I know, maybe traditional 80-year-old Russian males mollycoddle their women, and she simply expected it from me, not being sufficiently that is multicultured, enough not to impose/dictate her monocultured values onto me. Her lack of multi behaviour also really annoyed me. I expect people whom I admire to have a sense of cultural relativity and be able to project themselves into the shoes of a person of a different culture. There's another possible explanation for her attitudes, and that is that they are female. That is, they evolved. Women in the distant past were highly dependent on men for their survival, so they only gave their vaginas to men who were particularly nice to them and mollycoddled them. But as a masculist, I despise mollycoddling women. I expect women to be fips, to be adults, to be grown up and take responsibility for their own lives, and not expect a man they like to treat them like Princess Snowflake, who might just melt away with the slightest bit of penetrating sunlight. Masculism forces women to grow up, to behave as responsible adults. Masculists piss on Princess Snowflakes. This lesson that masculists piss on snowflakes needs to be learned by women, especially young women. Otherwise they risk not getting a man. Relationships between the sexes lately are really bad, as feminist influenced women feel they have the right to nag men, dump on men, due to these feminazis having had only their feminist consciousness raised, that is, their mono-conscious ignorance of how women oppress men, makes them anger-biased, gender-biased, and detestable by men. Men avoid such misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi bitches like the plague. Such women rot on the shelf, utterly rejected by men, not even being pumped and dumped, so that their feminazi bitch genes are removed from the gene pool. The last main email I got from her said that she thought we weren't compatible and that she wanted only to continue the intellectual chats. I too felt a basic incompatibility and decided to end it. I get better intellectual stimulus from the Ashkenazi Jewish genii mathematicians, whom I study avidly for hours every day, that no woman can compete with, given that these genius mathematicians are the smartest handful of men, of course men, in the world. So we broke up. We posted off the books we had lent each other, and that was that. I'm paid up for another 4 months in my subscription to an e-dating site, so I'm curious to see if I can meet another multicultural sage female who is not a Princess Snowflake. Time will tell. At the back of my mind, I tell myself that the odds may be stacked against me, being both a masculist and a sage prof. Sure, e-dating is a numbers game. For example, I get contacted by a female PhD about once a week. But as soon as I give them the masculist test, that is, I invite them to first look at the masculist videos on my website, they don't reply. But the odds are not good. So I'm resigning myself to being a MGTOW monk for the rest of my life. I prefer to have a bit of female company, since very few men are true hermits. But I'd rather live alone than be forced to put up with women's negative traits, such as nagging, princess snowflaking, etc. If I'm to have a relationship with a woman, she has to be a respect-worthy adult, with adult behaviours and expectations, not some child-minded female who withers at the first sign of the glaring sun, melting her precious little snowflake mentality. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In brackets, contains links to 300 YouTube masculist essays/videos and to the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 300 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Ciao.